First of all, we must know what is a rational comprehensive model. As we all know, rationalism is derived from cause-effect relation. When we find the cause-effect relations in all the activities of human beings, that is called as rationalism. For every effect, there is a cause. Without cause, there will not be any effect. So if we want to understand the effect, we must understand the cause. This is called as cause-effect relation. The cause-effect relation of human activity is called as rationalism. So in public policy also, we have rational comprehensive model. What is rational comprehensive model? In the rational comprehensive model, the policymakers try out some 4 or 5 policies and they list out what are the benefits of each policy and what are the costs of each policy, and they choose one among them. They choose the policy which have more benefits and less cost. The policy which has more benefits and it is less expensive and it is less costly, that is taken as a rational policy. So in policy making process, this rational comprehensive model is known for a very important model. This model is given by 2 important policy scientists. One is Lindblom, is a Western policy scientist. The other one is Robert Heumann. Robert Heumann or Lindblom, Charles Lindblom and Robert Heumann. Charles Lindblom and Robert Heumann. These are the 2 important policy scientists that have given this model. Now, first, let us discuss what is a rational comprehensive model. After that, we are going to discuss the incremental model. In fact, these 2 models are considered to be against each other. While the incremental model tries to continue with the old policies with small minor changes or marginal changes, the rational comprehensive model always tries to have a new policy in the place of old policies. One is focusing on new policy. The second one is focusing on incremental changes in the old policies. So the incremental model of public policy making is considered to be a conventional model or conservative model where policymakers do not affect many changes. They only change incremental changes. And even the benefits are also very incremental, not comprehensive. So this is called as incremental model. Whereas the rational comprehensive model is a very wholesale model with which new policies, new goals, new achievements, new modes of policy making are coming together. So these 2 policies, these 2 models of policies, today we are going to discuss. One is rational comprehensive model and second one is incremental model. These 2 models are used in policy formulation. So in today's class, what is rational comprehensive model in public policy making? That is the first item that we are going to discuss. And the second one is what is incremental model in public policy making? These 2 are 2 important models. While the first model, that's called rational comprehensive model, is a model that envisages new policies always. For every situation, a new policy is required. For every situation, a new decision making is required. For every situation, new institutions, new setup, new administration, new modes of government is required. This is for rational comprehensive model. But for incremental model, we can continue with the old model, with the old policy, with certain marginal changes or small changes or minor changes. So the rational comprehensive model is considered as a very revolutionary model, whereas the incremental model is only a conservative model or the old model. So first of all, let us discuss about the rational comprehensive model. As we all know, policy making requires many decisions. So in the rational comprehensive model, there are so many stages. First of all, in the first stage, we have to identify what are the policy goals, what are the policy achievements to be achieved, what are the policy standards that are to be achieved. This is called as the first stage of rational policy making. In the rational policy making, the first stage is we have to make the policy choices. We also need to have policy achievements, policy goals, policy settings. We must clearly define it. That is one thing. In the second stage, we must search for alternatives, policy alternatives for making a policy. What are the policy alternatives that are available? So, looking for alternative ways of resolving the problem is called as the alternative policies. So, alternative policies for a public policy is the second stage of rational policy making stage. In the third stage, we have to make predictions. We have to make the predictions on the successes of the policies. We have to make the predictions, say, for example, if there are 4 or 5 alternative policies. For each policy, we have to make what are the benefits and what are the costs of each policy. So this is called as policy predictions. Policy predictions on benefits and costs of each alternative policy. This is the third stage of policy making. In the first stage, we have to identify the problem on which the policies are to be made. In the second stage, we have to search for alternatives. What are the means? What are the ways with which we can solve the problem? Thirdly, in the third stage, for every policy, we require the cost benefit analysis. We have to see what are the successes of each policy and what are the costs of each policy. So this is the third stage. In the fourth stage, we have to calculate each cost and each success in each public policy. Supposing there are 4 or 5 alternatives, we have to weigh the costs and successes of each policies. What is the cost of the policy and what are the benefits of the policies? So that's called a cost benefit analysis. We have to make that analysis for each and every alternative policy. And fifth one is we have to choose a policy that has less cost and more benefits to the people. That is called as the rational comprehensive policy. So, in other words, rational comprehensive policy making has a lengthy process in which there are different stages. Charles Lindblom and Robert Havmore have come out with certain stages on comprehensive rational policy making, rational comprehensive policy making. According to these policy scientists, the comprehensive rational policy making process have certain 5 to 6 stages. In the first stage, the policymakers have to identify the problems on which the policy making is required. What are the problems for which policies are to be made? What is the crisis in the society? What is the socio-economic background of the problem? What are the problems that require a policy attention or public policy formulation? So, identification of problem that requires policy making is the first stage of policy making. In the second stage, we have to search for alternatives to resolve the problem. To resolve the problem, we have to search for 4 or 5 alternatives. And what are the ways and means through which policies have to be resolved? What are the ways through which the policies can be resolved? So, this is how alternative ways and means for policy resolution is to be made. So, this is the second stage. So, policy making is an important activity in which there are 5 to 6 stages according to comprehensive rational model, a rational comprehensive model. The first stage is we have to identify the problem that requires a public policy. The government generally formulate the public policies based on the requirement of the problems. Suppose there is an unemployment problem in the society. The government can make a policy to provide unemployment relief to all the unemployed people at the rate of 1,000 rupees per month or 2,000 rupees per month. This is a public policy. So whenever there is a public problem that gets the attention of the policymakers, and policymakers make a policy out of the problem. To resolve the problem, the policymakers make a public policy. So, for making public policies, the first stage is to identify the problem. We have to identify the problem, and that problem is required to have a public policy. A public policy is required for that public problem. So identification of public problem is the first stage. Second stage of public policy making, according to rational policy making, is to resolve a public problem, you have to search the ways and means. What are the ways, 4 or 5 ways, to which the policy can be addressed? And how? What are the means with which the policy can be addressed? So these are called as the alternative ways of addressing the problem. This is the second stage. In the second stage, the government wants to resolve the problem, but with the help of 4 or 5 ways. So, in which way the government have to resolve the problem? So, this is the second important aspect. That means to resolve the problem, the government search for alternatives, ways and means. So, in the first stage, the government identifies the problem of a society that requires a public policy. In the second stage, the government search for alternatives for policy making. What are the policy choices? What are the policy decisions that are to be taken? And what decision is rational? In the third stage, the government search for the costs and benefits of each decision. What are the decisions that the government has to take? That's the second stage. And in the third stage, for each decision, there is a cost and there is a benefit. So that's called a cost benefit analysis of each and every policy choice. Making cost benefit analysis from public policies is the third important stage. And in the fourth important stage, according to rational choice model, is examine each and every policy in the light of social values, social dignity, social honor, and the benefits that the policy gives to the people. So, society also have certain values. They are called as social values. Public policy may give economic value, but society has certain social values, ethical and moral values. So it examines the each policy choice in the light of social values, social honor of the people. So that is the fourth stage. In the fourth stage, the government examines what are the policy choices and what are the costs and benefits of each and every public policy choice. And lastly, in the fifth stage, the government chooses such policy which have less expensive value and more beneficial value. It is more beneficial to people and the costs of the policy are very less. So by making cost benefit analysis of each and every policy making decision, the government chooses one policy among 5 or 6 policy alternatives. This is called as a rational comprehensive model. The rational comprehensive model is a model that is chosen in all the Asian societies, African societies, and South American societies soon after the Second World War and when the nations got their independence and new governments were set up by the local leaders with their own constitutions, the public policies are changed, revamped, and all the irrational policies are wiped out. And in their place, a rational policy model has come into existence. So this is how the rational policy model occupies an important place in the third world societies, particularly in public policy choices. So the rational public policy model, this is also called as rational comprehensive model. This model is given by Charles Lindblom and Robert Havmore. So these are the important policy scientists that have given this policy. So according to these two policy scientists, the rational comprehensive model is a revolutionary model and that gave way to major changes in the governance of political systems, particularly in the states where the decolonization is started and nationalist movements are succeeded by setting up of the national governments. In 1947, India got independence. A national government is established in India. And that government's choice was to establish heavy industries in the place of small cottage industries. So the government's choice of industrial policy is to bring huge changes that can provide employment opportunities to youth throughout the country. And that policy choice wanted India to have international trade by exports and imports. So it has a vision, it has a mission. So this is an example for rational policy choice. As soon as India got independence in 1947, in 1948, the first industrial policy resolution is accepted. Again, the same policy resolution is revamped in 1956. So it's part of the Nehruvian model of development, where Nehruji, the first Prime Minister of India, wanted India to be industrially vibrant. It should produce industrial goods, and India should have an advantage of international trade with imports and exports. With this view, the previous British policies with regard to industrialization are wiped out. And Nehruji government has taken a new policy initiative that attracted thousands of rupees of investments, thousands of crores of rupees of investments in public sector undertaking. So the rational policy choice model is a model that envisages a complete revamp of the old policies and establishing new policies with a revolutionary vigor, with a dynamic vigor in the political society. Now let us recapitulate ourselves. What are the main points of the rational comprehensive model? The rational comprehensive model of public policy is given by Charles Lindbaum and Robert Havmore. They are the two important policy scientists that gave this model. It discusses about 5 stages where public policies can be made. In the first stage, according to this model, a problem of any society is to be identified, and that problem warrants public policy from the government. The government should make a public policy of a local problem, a government problem, a local social problem or economic problem, or a political problem, any problem. So identification of problem that requires policy making is the first stage of rational policy choice. The second important stage is when the problem is identified, how to solve the problem. There are 4 or 5 solutions for each and every problem. Each solution is a policy choice. So we have to search for alternatives in resolving the problem. So searching for alternatives to resolve the problem is the second important stage of policy making. The second important stage, the policymakers search for alternatives to resolve the problem. And the third important stage of policy making is the public policy makers study each and every alternative path of resolution. If a problem has four or five alternatives to resolve it, the policymakers study all the four or five alternatives, the ways through which the policy is to be addressed. So, this is how the policy study, thorough study on each and every model and each and every policy choice, each and every alternative to resolve the problem. This is the third important stage. This is the third important stage of public policy making. And in the fourth important stage, the policy choices have certain values, and the policymakers have to test the values with the broader social values. Society has certain values, certain society has certain social values, moral values, ethical values, professional values, spiritual values. In fact, every society is a value-ridden society. So the policy values are to suit with the values of society. They should be coherent with the values of the society. The coherence between the policy values and social values is closely examined by the policymakers in all the policy alternative choices. Suppose a problem can be solved in four or five methods or in four or five ways. So each way, each method is to be studied in the light of social values, economic values, moral values, spiritual values that are existing in the society. So giving value orientation to public policy choices is the fourth important stage of public policy making. And in the fifth stage, we have to study the costs and benefits for each policy choice. Suppose there are four or five policy choices to resolve a public problem. So these policy choices, one among these policy choices are to be taken as policy decision. Which policy decision is rational? According to Lindblom and Robert Havmore, the policy that is rational should be more beneficial to the people and less expensive to the society. It should be very less expensive to the public exchequer and it should be more beneficial to the people. So that policy that costs less and benefits more is considered as a rational policy. So this is called as the rational policy choice. So according to Lindblom and Charles Lindblom and Robert Havemann, the rational comprehensive policy choice model is a model that provides a complete revamp of the existing policies and examining the new modes of solving the problems, new paths of development, and new policy choices in the light of social values and economic values. So, this is how policy decisions are to be taken with rationality. What is rationality? In the beginning of the class, we have already discussed. The rationality means without any blind beliefs or without any unscientific faiths, we need to have the cause effect relation. We need to have cause effect relation. We have to study the relationship between effects and cause. The cause effect relation of human activity is known as rationality. And that element of rationality is to be followed in public policy making. How? The rationality element in public policy is to provide rationalism in decision making of policy making decision choices. So this is how the public policies are to be made with the help of a rational, comprehensive model of public policies. The second important model in public policy making is the incremental model. What is the incremental model? The incremental model is the second model where the public policies are to be made based on the previous year's policy choices. The incremental model always suggests the continuation of old policies. It did not want any new policies. It doesn't want any revolutionary changes. It is against to radical changes. It only wants the continuation of the old policies with some marginal changes, with some meager changes. That is called as the incremental model. The incremental model is also explained by Charles Lindblom and Robert Dahl and others. So it has certain important features. The incremental model, first of all, it is a continuation of the past policies. In every country, there are certain policies that are followed by various governments from time immemorial. For example, Britishers have followed certain agricultural policies, certain forest policies, certain industrial policies, certain welfare policies, certain import and export policies. Likewise. So that means certain policies are already there in existence in many countries. Only thing is when the government is changed, whether the same policy is followed or a new policy is formulated. This is a debatable question. The incremental policy says that the same old age policies are to be continued even after the new government takes over the power. So incremental model is a model that tries to continue the old model, the old policies. As a result of the continuation of the old model, people only have a only maximum marginal benefit. The benefits of the policies are not so rampant, but only marginal benefit is occurring to the people. So this is called incremental model. Incremental model has certain important features. The first one is it's a repetition of past policies. It's a repetition of past policies because the policy lineup is followed by world governments as well. The policy has always been followed by many governments for the last many years. This is the first one. And secondly, the policy is again introduced, though with a new name, but only with a marginal change or small changes in the policy making. So, in fact, the same old policies are continued with only a marginal change, a small change in the actions of the government. This is the second important feature. And thirdly, the incremental model opposes the rational choice model because the rational choice model warrants new decisions, new policies, new policy successes, new value orientation, new elements in the policy making. So the incremental model doesn't accept it. It only appeals for the continuation of the old policies. So this is the third important aspect of the policy making. The policy making and incremental model suspect that the new models of policy making certainly do not benefit the people for longer times. The world policies which have been under vogue and which are benefiting the people are only the policies that are to be continued. But new policies may benefit or may not benefit the people. So there is a sense of ambiguity or doubt in the new policies benefiting a large number of people. That's why the increment model is against the new policies. It is in favor of the continuation of the same old policies. It wants to continue the same old policies. So it is uncertainty of new policies is one reason for which incremental model is followed. And thirdly, the world policies are formulated by previous governments for the last 10 years and 5 years or even more than that. And the governments, successive governments, have invested huge amounts of investments on the world policies. That's why suddenly new policies cannot change, cannot come. That's why incrementalism or incremental model is followed. With the help of incremental model, the same old policy can be continued with some minor changes, not with the major changes. So the new policy may invest huge money, may require huge investments of money. That's why the old policies are continued. So this is beneficial to the country because it doesn't require or it doesn't warrant huge investments again and again. But in incremental policy, huge investments are already invested by the previous governments. So the present government need not invest huge amounts in policy making again and again. So that's why the policy continuation of world policies with the consent of the executive of the present day is the need of the hour. And they oppose any new policy that attracts huge investments of money. This is one thing. And secondly, the world policies are politically expedient. They are politically necessary. They are politically needed because the politicians always show the world policies and measure their performance with benefits to disclose this to the people. Whenever there is an election or a ballot exercise, the political leaders go to the people and say that their respective policies have achieved huge achievement and success in getting huge standards of life, likewise, or increasing the good standards of living of the people, or so. So, world policies have an advantage of claiming success, claiming achievements due to their continuation of long time. But a new policy cannot claim a surprise success suddenly at a time. That's why the old policies are preferred, even by political leaders. Political leaders feel that world policies are required, and if the world policies are continued, that would benefit to their political career. So this is also another important aspect of policy making. And lastly, in every society, there are multiple number of groups, multiple number of castes, multiple number of religions, multiple cultures. In fact, in modern era, every society is called as a multicultural society. We have multiple groups, multiple associations, multiple pressure groups, multiple interest groups, multiple political parties, multiple religions, multiple caste structures, multiple tribes. So everything is multiple. In such a case, you cannot formulate a policy with much diversity of the people. There is a lot of social diversity due to many groups in the society. There is cultural diversity due to many cultures in the society, due to economic diversity, due to more economic inequalities in the society. So, in such a society with so much of diversity, we cannot achieve a policy agreed upon by all the people at a time. That's why the government is convinced, the political leaders convince the government that we cannot have one single policy decision that is agreed by all the people. So, general agreement to any policy is not easy to get it because the society is diversified. Every society is a diversified society. So, this is one reason why the governments do not want to have new policies or new policy decisions. They want to continue the old policy decisions or policies. Because in a society where the political groups are more, the social groups are more, the economic pressure groups and interest groups are more, we cannot have unanimity of opinion on any public policy at a time. That's why the policymakers always try to achieve unanimity only in the case of old policies. That's why the old policies are always accepted in all unanimity by the people. So, due to these reasons, the incremental policies are preferred in every country. Incrementalism is an idea of Western societies. All the Western societies are against to revolutionary changes in any sector of public life, may it be agriculture, may it be education, may it be public health, may it be industries and industrialization or infrastructure. So no government wants the revolutionary changes at a time. That's why governments always want to have an incremental change, a change that is assured in different phases in a gradual manner. So incremental model, on the other hand, is a model that perpetuates the descent, that increases the chance of people supporting it, that enhances the credibility of the government with the old policies. So that's why incrementalism and incremental policies with incremental growth, is always accepted by the people. So the public policy model, particularly the incremental model, is chosen due to so many reasons. As we have discussed in the lesson, the first reason is what is incremental model? In fact, the very concept of incremental model is given by Charles Lindblom and Robert Hammore. So these are the two philosophers, policy scientists that gave this model. Now let us see what are the characteristic features of these models. The first and foremost important aspect is the incrementalism stresses on the continuation of old policies. Secondly, the incremental model stresses on minor changes in the policy making, and it is against to revolutionary change or major change, either in the policy structure or policy decision or policy choice or policy evaluation or policy institutions. In all these matters, the incrementalism only tries to have a marginal benefit, a marginal changes in the already existing social models. This is the second important thing. And thirdly, incremental model always supported by intelligent people, because a new model of policies always require new model of thinking, new intellectuals. Likewise, that's why incremental model is accepted. Incremental model is accepted due to so many reasons. The first reason is, when a new policy is formulated, the government is not quite sure whether the new policy will yield new benefits. If it's a old policy, the government is sure what is the benefit of the policy and what is the expense of the policy. But for new policies, the government is not quite sure on the benefits of the policy and on the cost of the so policy making. So, in the event of uncertainty or the benefits of the proposed policy, the old policies are continued. This is the first reason. Secondly, in the world policies, so huge investments are already made. The government has already made huge investments in these policies. And the government doesn't want to have a new policy, because if it chooses to have a new policy, it should invest again in larger quantums of money on the new projects. That's why, to minimize the expenditure of the government, old policies are supported by the government. This is the second reason. And thirdly, the world policies are accepted because it is politically necessary for the politicians. Politicians require this kind of decisions because politicians always claim to have achieved huge benefits from public policies. So if they continue with the same public policy for over a decade or 2 decades, they can easily assess the success of the policy or the loopholes of the policy. The ruling party candidates in the election can canvass for the success of the same policy, while the opposition candidates wants criticism against the existing policy. That's why it is politically expedient and politically needed for the political parties for the continuation of the world policies. And thirdly, the world policies already attracted huge investments of money. So in the light of new policies, new policy require huge investments of money. The government is not in a position to invest money again and again for the new policies. That's why old policies are continued in all the governments. And likewise, the new policies require agreed concerns, consensus among the people on the policy choice, policy success, and policy costs. It is very difficult to evolve consensus from a group of people, from a diversified group of people. In fact, modern societies are so diversified that there is social differences, economic differences, cultural differences, technological differences in every society. That's why wiping out all the differences among the people, it is very difficult to achieve a consensus on any policy choice. So due to these reasons, incremental model is accepted by the government. Incremental model also have an advantage of benefiting the people with slow growth and slow benefits. In the incremental model, the people get their benefits in a slower manner, in a very marginal manner. So incremental model do not evade development. They actually ensure development, but with less achievement and less success rate. So this is how incremental model is accepted by the governments. And incremental model is accepted because it is politically expedient to the political parties. Political parties want only the incremental model of development. They do not want new model of development and define the success of a public policy because every policy has its gestation period and you cannot judge a policy success or failure just in 1 year or 2 years or 5 years. If you have to judge a policy, it's a good policy or bad policy, you may require some 5 years of time or 10 years of time. So there must be some policy continuum for a decade or half decade to make a judgment on the success or failure of a policy. That's why public policies require huge time to judge whether the policy is pro people or anti people. So, due to all these reasons, public policies are formulated in incremental manner. This is called as incremental. So, friends, today we have studied two important lessons in public policy making. One is the rational comprehensive model. The second one is incremental model. In the rational comprehensive model, new policies are evolved in the place of old policies. And new policy parameters, new success rates, new investments, new political views are expected in all the new policy making with the help of rational political policy, a rational choice policy. But in the case of existing policies, that is the incremental policies, the new policies are very expensive for the people. That's why the world policies only are continued for over so many years. So the rational comprehensive policy is better suited for the new societies where the colonialism has ended and decolonialism started. The national governments have taken over the power from the colonial masters, and every country has its own constitution. So, in the light of this, and these new prime ministers and presidents take new rules and regulations for the government. So, that is called a new administration. In the new administration, we may require the policy making in a much more rational manner, much more meaningful manner. But in an incremental policy model, we may have to continue with the same old policies, the same old investments on public policies, the same old analysis of policies on their success or failure, the same old evaluation of the public policies is done in public policy making. So these are the two divergent models on public policy making. The first one is rational comprehensive model. The second one is incremental model. These are the two models of public policy making. These two models appear to be against each other because the rational choice model always opposes a old policy. It wanted a new policy, new goals, new policy decisions, new set of government, new institutions with which policies are to be implemented, formulated, implemented, and evaluated. But whereas incremental policy wants the world system of evaluation, the world system of policy making, the world system of policy execution is required. That's why in all the post-industrial societies, post-independent societies of Asia, Africa, and South America, particularly after the Second World War, these countries have adopted for the rational choice model. The rational choice model, the colonial policies are replaced by the new policies of national governments. Take, for example, in India, the Indian government has new industrial policy, agriculture policy, import export policy, foreign policy with non alignment, Panchashil as its important features. So, this is how the new rational comprehensive model envisages for the new public policy making, new decision making in public policies. Whereas in the incremental model, we find the people supporting the world policies, the world rule, the world government, likewise. So this is how the public policy making is taking new strides with the help of rational policy making, rational comprehensive policy making. And incremental policy making is also prevalent in India. For example, in India, we have the reservation policy. The reservation policy is continued as part of a promise made to people by the Constitution in Article 15 and Article 16 of the Indian Constitution. All the students and youth of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and other backward classes are promised against the social domination or professional domination by other groups. So this is how the reservation policy is a continuation of the world policy. The agriculture policy is a continuation of world policy. Whereas the industrial policy is a new policy that has commenced in 1948. But in 1991, Manmohan Singh government under P. Narasimha Rao as the chief minister, prime minister, they demanded for new policy making. So this is how the policy making also requires new thoughts, new ideas, new settings, new targets, new policy decisions. And policy making has become a study of public choice because it studies not only the policies formulated by the government, it also studies about various policy choices, alternative choices of public policies. So this is what we study about. In the next class, maybe tomorrow we'll be discussing about the role of legislature, executive, and judiciary in the policy making. And if time permits, we'll also have the role of mass media in public policy making. So, public policy making is an art, and this art is adopted and imbibed by our first generation leaders of national government in India and the leaders of successive governments. So, these leaders want India to discontinue with the past and learn for new future by heaving a sigh of relief and setting a new value orientation to the Indian society. So this is all about the policy making. In tomorrow's class, we'll be discussing about the role of political institutions like legislature, executive, and judiciary in the policy making. Thank you, friends. Thank you very much.